Sorry, we all just need to take a second to admire the look. I just didn't think it was gonna pop off this hard. Welcome and/or welcome back to my channel, whoever you may be. Lately, these days, honestly, no one's seeing my videos except for people who are already subscribed, so it's mostly a welcome back. But if you want to share with friends who you think might enjoy what I'm putting out into the world and they can get into it too, that would be fun and nice, I think. Fire Emblem Awakening came out on the 3DS about 10 and a half years ago. If I was better at planning, I would have made this video in February, but I didn't have the foresight to do that. It came out on the 3DS, which is such a good console. I put so many hours into my 3DS. I'm kind of sad that the Switch ruined handheld gaming as we know it, or changed it forever, because now it's become the one-stop shop for everything you could possibly need. But the dual screen approach of the DS was just so cool. Also, can we pour one out collectively for the PS Vita? She really walked so the Switch could run. Awakening as a game has an interesting history because Intelligent Systems and Fire Emblem as a franchise, they weren't doing so hot. They were running out of money. So Awakening is the culmination of all of their efforts to save the company and keep the franchise going. And Awakening did that. They sold over 1 million copies, making it the first entry in the franchise to do so. Fire Emblem had a limited presence in the West, and the inclusions of Marth and Roy in Super Smash Bros. Melee really helped generate a lot of interest in the franchise. But if you weren't keyed into the GBA games and really paying attention for when the DS games came out, or if you're one of the lucky few people who got Path of Radiance or Radiant Dawn not for $300 on eBay, basically, if you weren't already part of the niche community, you probably didn't really know what Fire Emblem was. So Awakening really paid off for the business. With solid marketing, a colorful cast of characters, extremely robust social sim elements, new combat mechanics, and a strong story, Awakening was a really attractive entry point for a lot of people into the series. A lot of people don't look back on the game very fondly. A lot of people think the story is silly and vapid, and I agree with that position to an extent, but I don't think it's as bad as people say it is. When I was talking about Engage and really poking a lot of holes in that game, I got a lot of responses about the 3DS era Fire Emblem titles being like, well, those games are fucking dumb too. So how come you like those ones, but you don't like Engage? Make it make sense. And I just think we don't give Awakening and Fates enough credit as a community, especially Awakening. I think Fates is more like Engage in the sense that the gameplay is really good and the story is quite lackluster, but Awakening has all the pieces. It gets us from point A to point B, and it makes sense. Detractors will also call out the story for being generic, which is true, but for me, that's not really a negative. I think they do a lot of stuff to make it unique in its own right. I also think that Awakening came out at the right time on the 3DS. The 3DS is really interesting in that it doesn't have a huge library, and the games that are good for the 3DS are really, really good. So there's not a lot of competition. I feel like if you're a big Nintendo person and you're looking for those AAA titles, the ones that they were pumping out are so good that I think a lot of people will have a pretty similar library of core series games. I'm pretty sure Awakening is also my most played game of all time. If not, then Awakening and Three Houses are probably close to being tied for me. I don't know what 15-year-old me was doing. Because I played this game a lot in my youth, I did want to make the run a little bit more interesting. In hindsight, I probably should have just done an Iron Man run. I think that would have been more thrilling. I don't know. That's a challenge for another day. The game opens with a premonition of Robin and Chrom fighting against Valadar. It's shown in Robin's POV, and she gets possessed by some kind of darkness, so she ends up turning on Chrom, and he has a lightning bolt in his chest, and then we wake up. Chrom and Lissa come across Robin in a field in the Halidom of Elise, and pick her up off the ground. Robin has amnesia because games love doing this, but Chrom and Lissa welcome her with open arms. Robin is an avatar character, so she's a player insert. She is lightly customizable, so I chose Femme Robin with green hair because green has a strong association with dragons and I just thought it would be cute. Frederick is their retainer / escort, and he doesn't like Robin at all, which is very fair. She's a little sus. We end up visiting the capital, Elistal, and we meet Emerin, who is the Exalt, which is this setting's equivalent to a queen, but make it religious. Emerin, Chrom, and Lissa are all siblings. Afterwards, we're introduced to the Shepherds, which is Chrom's ragtag group of quirky soldiers. Rapid fire, in the first few chapters, we meet Sully. She's a cavalier. She's a tough as nails, butch top, but definitely like not a lesbian. She's not a lesbian. Virion is a man whore archer. Stahl is another cavalier. He's just a guy. Like literally that's it. Very vanilla. Vake is like the frat guy archetype, but give him a big axe to swing. Muriel is a mage, and she will never let you forget that she is a woman in STEM. She will push her glasses up if it's the last thing she does. Kellum is an armor knight, and the joke with him is that despite being really huge in physical stature and wearing really bulky armor, no one notices him. Kellum, in my opinion, is a little bit of an underrated character. Sumia is our resident clumsy girl, and she's a Pegasus Knight. Maribel is a snobbish, high-class, arrogant troubadour. Donal starts off as a villager and is recruitable in a side chapter. The point of Donal is that he starts off really weak, but he has a skill that increases his likelihood of getting a stat growth when he levels up, so there's higher reward potential with him as a unit, especially if you invest in him a lot. In this run, for me, he was a war criminal. Donal was cleaning up. There are two main things set up in these early game chapters that will follow us throughout the whole game. One is the conflict between Elise and neighboring country Plegia, and the second is the appearance of the Risen. Plegia is a seafaring desert nation to the west of Elise. They worship the fell dragon Grima, which puts them at odds with pretty much the rest of the world because they all worship the divine dragon Naga. Naga and Grima can kind of be thought of as he, him, God, and the devil. The reason why there's bad blood between Elise and Plegia is because of Crom's father, who was the previous king, and he had a little bit of a thing for terrorizing Plegia. Emerin inherited the throne after he died and ushered in a new era of peace, but obviously this war wasn't that long ago, and the wound clearly hasn't healed, and Plegia, unsurprisingly, they haven't moved on. Especially when you consider that this new era of peace is mostly to the benefit of Elise. The game does very little to establish how reparations were made in Plegia, if at all, because we're presented with the idea that the Plegians are comically villainous devil worshippers first, and then the game subtly tries to sneak in there that actually the previous Exalt did a lot of damage. They're not really set up in a very sympathetic light, even though I think they're kind of the victims in this instance. Like, just because Elise went, we're gonna stop bullying you, it doesn't mean that the conflict goes away. Anywho, the game doesn't tackle that because we're the good guys, right? Moving away from that, in chapter 1, a hole opens up in the sky and a fleet of zombie-like creatures called the Risen emerge. Lucina also comes through this tear in the sky wearing the iconic butterfly mask, and she introduces herself to the party as Marth, which is the name of the legendary hero of old. If this game wasn't 10 years old and extremely popular, I would have really milked the Lucina identity reveal, but literally anybody who's played Smash Bros. Knows about this plot point, so I'm not going to make a meal out of it. Lucina is Crom's daughter from the future, but she keeps that hidden for a little while. And now that we have our setup, our first act follows the war with Plegia. The Mad King Gangrel keeps attacking the borders of Elise because he wants to take the Fire Emblem from Elistal. The Fire Emblem is the MacGuffin in every game in the series. In Awakening, it is a shield that can perform the Rite of Awakening if you collect all the Dragon Balls and summon the Dragon Shenron and you get to make a wish, etc., etc. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. Since war is imminent, Emerin sends us to Regna Ferox, a military nation to the north, to curry favor and gain a most valuable ally. We fight some Feroxy soldiers at the border because they assume that we're imposters, and after defeating them, they escort us to the capital where we meet Flavia, the East Khan. Ferox is a two-party military state, and instead of voting, they hold a big fight every few years where either Khan hires some champions to fight in this trial by combat for rulership. Flavia promises Feroxy support in the war effort if Crom and Pals fight on her behalf, which we do. And if this game was a different story, more Game of Thronesy, this would be so dangerous and politically problematic for Crom, the prince, to be messing with another country's affairs, especially when two parties are in direct conflict with each other. Like, thank God Basilio is a nice person. We get the iconic Arena Ferox fight, which is constantly used as the visual reference to Awakening. It's a stage in Smash Brothers. It's the legacy map for Lucina in Engage. We come back to Arena Ferox a lot. Lucina as Marth fights on behalf of the Western Khan, Basilio, and her and Crom get into their iconic sword fight where he starts questioning why she also wields the falchion. In my mind, for a long time, this sword is called the Falchion, but falchion is technically the right pronunciation. I just want you to know that I think it's gross. Anyways, we win. Flavia becomes the ruler, and Basilio gifts us lon'qu, who was originally Basilio's main chosen champion, but then he switched him out for Lucina instead because she's stronger. It's weird that he just like gives him to us though. lon'qu is Awakening's long-standing FE trope of like the lone wolf, speedy Myrmidon swordsman, but his gimmick is that he's really afraid / disgusted / uncomfortable around women. Awakening AU, where lon'qu is just an incel. Just kidding, he has trauma. That's how they justify it. The next few chapters center on the fight with Plegia. Gangrel kidnaps Maribel and holds her for ransom across the border. We get her back with the help of young mage Rickon. Back at the capital, assassins are sent to kill Emerin, but Lucina is here to prevent this future from happening. Here we recruit Gaius, a thief with a sweet tooth who is extremely popular for reasons that I'm clearly not aware of. Here we also meet Pan. She is the last survivor of the Togwell race. They are a species of shapeshifters that can transform into large rabbit-like beasts. The Togwell are very cool. I think they're underserved in this game from a lore perspective, but I really like Pan as a character. She's awesome. We're also introduced in the main narrative to Valadar again, the guy from the very first chapter. He's leading the assassination charge on Emerin, and he does technically die at the end of this chapter, but he's revived by supernatural forces for plot reasons. Gangrel is still after Emerin and the Fire Emblem, so the group flee east. While that's happening, a platoon of Pegasus Knights are killed by Plegian forces, leaving Cordelia as the only survivor. She's the perfect soldier and she's in love with Crom, but he'll never love her back. Aww. She's really her own inner saboteur because she just decided for herself that she'll never have a relationship with Crom. But she's always like pining for it. It's like, girl, have you tried talking to him? Plegian soldiers are apparently everywhere in Elise, so nowhere is safe for Emmy, and she returns to the capital only to be captured by Gangrel and taken across the border to be executed. Slay. That's inappropriate. So now we shift gears and we have to head east. Nope. West into Plegia to save Emerin. Along the way, we meet Noe, who is a child and is presented like a child and acts like a child, but she's a 20 billion year old dragon. So technically we're allowed to think she's hot, right? Right? And it's absolutely fine that she's wearing a bathing suit. I love men who make games. She's being accompanied by Gregor, who's a mercenary, but also Russian. Like he's very early 2010s in Soviet Russia humor. Libra is a war monk and is perfectly androgynous, and the joke is that people think that he's a woman all the time. Ugh, it's just like so relatable because I also hate it when I'm out and about and someone just like mistakes me for a gorgeous, beautiful, radiant woman. That's so horrible. Tharia is big titty goth girlfriend. She's a dark mage and a fan favorite. I think she serves a really specific niche in like the tights and nylon community. Anna is a recruitable side character not encountered in the main story. She is like the Fire Emblem equivalent to Nurse Joy in that she comes from a huge network of Annas who all look the same and are all merchants. I mostly bring her up to emphasize Crom being characterized as kind of horny because he flirts with a couple of the Annas that we meet, and he has Riz. The Libra Tharia recruitment chapter takes place in some Pelagian ruins, and Gangrel is making Emerin walk the plank pretty much, and after this big fight, she chooses to sacrifice herself and she jumps in hope that martyring herself will end the war. And it definitely lowers the morale of the Pelagian people, who are already kind of over the fighting. Gangrel is sowing a lot of chaos and discord in his country, all for the sake of like, not petty revenge, but the war could be over, right? And the people wouldn't be suffering as much. Crom and company flee, and in the next battle, we fight against Mustafa, who is a rare named chapter boss who has actual characterization. Like at the top of the fight, he says that his troops will show mercy to the Elysians if they choose to drop their weapons. Obviously, we don't, because this is a game about fighting. There's dialogue mid-fight between him and one of his soldiers where the soldier's like, I would love to leave. I don't want to be here anymore. And he inspires him to continue fighting, but also is like compassionate in the sense that he would have just let the troop go. It's just kind of interesting that Fire Emblem tends to struggle with depth. And yet this like random side character who has 10 lines of dialogue is actually interesting. After defeating his forces, Olivia, a silent wallflower, gorgeous dancer, and one of Basilio's associates. She somehow manages to escort our party away from the battlefield. The game doesn't tell us what this actually means. Like, I don't know why she's here to pick us up. Does she have carriages? Does she know a secret path to go through in the desert? Is she good at navigating? Like, I don't know why it's her. Then we have the big fight against Gangrel, finally, and after the group defeats him, Pelagia is in total disarray without a ruler, and they're poor because Elise expects them to pay reparations, so the war really ruins the country. There's a couple year time skip here. Crom becomes the Exalt, gets married, and has a daughter named Lucina. We're gonna take a break here, grab some water, get a snack, hit subscribe, because we're gonna talk about Awakening's main attraction, pun intended, marriage and children. There are 13 second generation characters that can be recruited thanks to time travel shenanigans. Crom, Robin, and 11 of the women in the cast can all have children in a god-honoring way because the characters have to be married. Otherwise, how do you even have sex? I don't have a ring, and that's why I'm still a virgin. The child characters are attached to one specific parent, and then they adopt the hair color of the spouse. Except Lucina, she will always have blue hair and be stunningly gorgeous. A big part of planning for a playthrough is deciding who to couple up, because there are gameplay elements that are affected by your chosen pairings, and there's a lot to consider because it's a pretty flexible system. Robin can marry anybody of the opposite binary gender that you've chosen, and then 10 of the women can marry any 12 of the men within the husband pool. Crom and Sumia's marriage options are the most restricted, and I think it's specifically to encourage them to marry each other, because outside of Robin and each other, they only have 3 other potential options. We need to take a moment here to talk about Sumia getting shafted by the writers. I'm pretty sure what happened is Intelligent Systems had an early draft of the game story where they decided the general shape of how they wanted the narrative to go, and in that story, Sumia was chosen for the role of wife. And then at some point later, they realized that they can expand the children mechanic into something more robust, and a whole cast of children could come back from the future. Sumia is featured as Crom's wife holding Lucina in the game's intro cutscene before you even hit the main menu to hit start. So that gives a little bit more credibility to the opinion of Sumia being canonically Crom's wife. Also, unlike every other side character, she has a custom CG still in the main story where she meets her Pegasus, and then she appears in another pre-rendered cutscene where she saves Crom. Like, she really matters a lot in the first few chapters, and then unless you marry her, she's completely out of the story, because whoever marries Crom ends up taking a more central role, especially when Lucina is revealed as their daughter and enters the narrative more concretely. This through line, though, makes a lot of sense for Sumia because she's a well-established character from the beginning. With that being said, for this run, I did not pair Sumia and Crom together. I usually either choose them or Crom and Olivia, which is hard to achieve because Crom is forced to get married to the woman that he's closest with at the end of chapter 11, which is the first map that Olivia is actually playable in. So you have to make sure that Crom is as far away from any other potential wives as possible, and then like really buddy them up together in that chapter. Anyways, I chose Crom x Maribel because I had this idea to do meme pairings, but then after picking this couple, I literally didn't take that idea any further and try to do like mismatched kind of personalities or anything. Maribel's main character trait outside of being obnoxious is that she's really obsessed with Lissa. So a lot of her and Crom's support conversations are about his sister. Even their proposal centers her. Like, it's really odd. You'd think that Maribel would be more excited to become the queen and improve her social standing as a noble. So it's just odd that she's concerned about Lissa. I guess that shows her as like not a whatever the high society equivalent of a gold digger is. Like, it's probably good for her character that she's not depicted in that way, but I'm sure she would have thought about it, at least. For my other couple choices, I paired Lissa with Donal. Their supports are boring, so nothing to report really. Sully and Stahl decide that they will become the new Bull and Panther, which is a reference to the original Fire Emblem Green and Red Knights. Basically, one is a little stronger and one is a little faster than the other. They're a long-standing Fire Emblem trope of having 2 cavaliers that are green and red. Their supports depict them training together because Sully is annoyed that Stahl isn't really trying, and then at a certain point Stahl surpasses her, and Sully expresses concern about others perceiving her as naturally weaker than Stahl because she's a woman. You know, she's concerned that people will expect him to be stronger than her. Stahl reassures her that no one will think that she's weak because she's one of the strongest people in the army, but he's sympathetic to where she's coming from. Interesting social commentary. In my Fire Emblem game from 2013, I was pleasantly surprised. Vake and Olivia behave like annoying straight people because Vake is kind of annoyed by every facet of her personality, but she's really hot, so he's into her. It's framed as Vake like trying to make Olivia more confident, but he's really just stepping on her interests. I don't like it. I don't like them together. I didn't feel good about it. Muriel is trying to turn Libra into an evangelical influencer and wants to optimize his engagement. Gaius is another man annoyed by a woman because Sumia is just so clumsy and annoying, but she bakes a cake for him at the end of their support string, and she keeps the husband happy, you know? Straight people are nuts. Kellum offers to spar with Pan, and Pan is like, no, I don't spar. I murder. I will murder you. Pan is a really strong attacker. Kellum obviously has very strong defenses. So they spar a few times, and over their supports, they attract a lot of the camp's attention because their fights are just incredible. Kellum slips at some point that he wanted to spar with Pan to make it easier for her to socially interact with people around the camp, so it would help her be less socially isolated. They also establish that Kellum isn't invisible to Pan because she learns his scent, so they're technically like made for each other. Cordelia trains with lon'qu and reveals that she's been doing things around camp to take care of him, like making sure his weapons are maintained, making his favorite meals for supper. lon'qu flips the switch. He reverse Uno cards it, and he does a bunch of these chores to make her life a little bit easier because she's a total, not a busybody. I learned not that long ago that busybody means nosy and doesn't mean someone who really likes to keep busy. Cordelia does a lot of stuff for people around the camp, and so lon'qu is trying to ease her burden a little bit. At some point, he also calls out her thinly veiled feelings for Crom, and she's like, but I don't love him anymore. It's you, lon'qu. It's always been you. It's always been you. He kind of gets over his trauma for women at this point. When your ex dies, you just have to meet somebody new, and then you'll be healed. I paired Noe and Rickon because it's visually age appropriate and I have nothing more to say on the matter. Virion simps for Tharia, and she's developing curses and testing them on Virion. She's basically forcing him to do errands for her, and then at a certain point he's like, I'm not cursed, I'm just obsessed with women. Shersh, a wyvern rider who we'll meet right away here, gets along with Gregor, and apparently he saved her wyvern Minerva many, many years ago, and he can also understand dragon speak, so they can both talk to her, so they're kind of a match in that way. After the time skip, Crom has ascended the throne and things are largely peaceful, but invaders are apparently coming from overseas to take over the world. He's also keeping the emblem in his possession. If you promote Crom from Lord into Great Lord, he even wears the emblem as a shield, which is a cool detail. Walhart, the Conqueror, a red emperor if we've ever seen one, plans on taking over the world and comes from the neighboring continent of Valm. Virion and Shersh come to Regna Ferox to deliver the news after fleeing the Duchy of Roseanne. Virion was the Duke there, but he's kept it a secret that he's a deserter the whole time because it's extremely shameful that he left his people behind. Shersh is his retainer. She's also top 5 characters for me. She's well-rounded, she's funny, really strong, beautiful. In order to prepare for Valm's arrival, the shepherds return to Plegia, which is now being ruled by Valadar. They ask for boats and for money, and Valadar is like, sure, take it, go for it. And no one thought that that was weird or off-putting, that he was like, yeah, totally, have a boat, have a bunch of boats, take some cash. Do you need a snack? I would have been like, what's the ruse? Valadar also introduces us to the Hierophant, who looks exactly like Robin, so this whole situation is actually really normal and good, and nothing bad could possibly happen. Also, reveal, Robin is his daughter, so the general theory is that the Hierophant could be Robin's twin. Anyways, the shepherds are attacked on their way out of Plegia, like randomly, doesn't have anything to do with the creepy interaction that we just had with the villain-coded people, who we were at war with a couple years ago for forever, at all. It's not connected. Henry joins us here. He's another dark mage. His whole thing is gimmicky, punny humor. Here is a good time as any to bring up the fact that all of the good Plegians who join our party are white, including Robin. I think it's a little dubious that this country is like quite specifically coded as Middle Eastern / North African, which, granted, that region of the world does encapsulate a wide variety of skin tones, but all of the major bad guys here are brown people. So I'm like, where are the protagonist dark skin tone options? Let Robin be dark. Valadar is dark, which, I mean, I can relate. Coming from Middle Eastern parents where one is noticeably darker than the other, and yet I stand here pale as the day, I understand this phenomenon, but let Robin be dark. We don't even know what her mother looks like. She could look like anybody. So the fact that there isn't like a shade range option for the skin tones, a little dubious to me. Henry and Robin and Tharia's whiteness is more noticeable too, because every Pelagian that we meet in the game with a custom portrait is dark. I feel like the easy counterpoint to my argument is that there are dark-skinned characters on the cast. Like Basilio is literally a war hero and probably makes like the biggest, most heroic decision in the game, Basilio is really great. But I think what makes it iffy for me is that Basilio and Flavia don't necessarily come from a real world coded country. It's a little iffy to me that Awakening presents white Middle Eastern people as good and dark Middle Eastern people as bad, which is also bolstered by how this is the only region in the world where they follow the evil religion. I think this is also somewhat of a manifestation of colorism in Japan and light skin being coveted more so than dark skin. It also kind of reminds me of Hyrule Warriors, how they had that one witch character who, when she was evil, her skin was dark, but then when she became a good guy, she became light skinned or white. The fact that our white heroes don't follow the religion and they denounce the religion, but the bad, tanned, and darker people do follow the religion. I don't think the game is explicitly trying to be Islamophobic in its presentation, but I do think all the pieces put together make it just seem very ignorant. Anyways, back to the narrative. We're on the island. Lucina reveals that she's Crom's daughter, and she explains how she traveled back in time to prevent her future from coming to fruition. In her timeline, Grima is revived and everybody dies. The scene plays out slightly differently depending on who Crom marries, because she obviously has to meet her mom here too. Maribel thinks Crom is cheating on her with Lucina, and randomly Lissa and Robin are also there, even though they don't have to be. I like Lucina a lot. I think her circumstances are really what makes the game interesting. Her narrative is what makes this title more unique in the Fire Emblem catalog of Light Dragon versus Dark Dragon. Adding in that time travel layer gives us a little bit more nuance. We use the Pelagian ships to destroy the Valmese ships so they can't make it across the water, and then the shepherds make it across the ocean to Valm. Here we meet Sayri, and if you had asked me like a year ago how much she contributes to the plot, I'd be like, not really, she's pretty tertiary, not memorable, which is just not true. I think because she isn't a marriage pool character, she doesn't stand out very much, but Sayri is like main cast during this second act in Valm. Basically, Walhart has totally disrupted the entirety of the continent, and many of the Dynasts have sworn allegiance to him because they'll die if not. It's not a very passionate commitment, but they're committed nonetheless. And one of his followers includes Sayri's brother, Yenfei. He's basically being forced to follow Walhart because he's being threatened by Exilis, who is an omnipotent mage-type, gay-coded supervillain character and one of Walhart's cronies. Sayri is the princess of Chonsin, which is this world's vague East Asia equivalent, and she's never explicitly stated to be the leader of the resistance against Walhart, but she's responsible for starting it, and they follow her, and they listen to her, and it's frustrating that the game works really hard to make sure that they don't say out loud that she's the leader, even though that's the role that she's performing, because she's radicalized all these nation states to rebel. Also, the game doesn't let her assume the throne during or after the story, after saving Chonsin and all of the neighboring nation states. So we're 2 for 2 for girls who are dressed in pink and get shafted by the narrative. The first order of business is to free Tiki, the original nubile dragon girl. She's the voice of Naga, which makes her a religious leader of sorts because she can commune with the goddess, and she's likely to inspire the resistance to continue the fight if she's freed from Walhart's capture. She's being held at the Mila Tree, which is one of the prettiest FE maps I think ever. It's very high fantasy to fight at a giant magic tree where a gorgeous dragon priestess resides. After rescuing her, Tiki and Robin have a short interaction where she says, "You have power like mine," which is also the name of the instrumental that plays during Tiki and Naga-focused scenes. Robin, dragon girl confirmed, except she's not a divine dragon. So I wonder what that means for us. Anyways, we travel south, take out a couple more high-ranking conquest soldiers before getting to Yenfei, who's hiding in a volcano for whatever reason. He ends up dying in the battle, and Exilis warps in to be annoying and gross. He taunts Sayri for killing her brother and reveals that he was only supporting Walhart because Exilis threatened to kill her if he didn't. They're very much leaning into the tragedy. At some point, it gets established that we have to find the 5 gemstones to perform the Rite of Awakening and unlock the emblem's power. Elise already has the silver gem. Tiki gives us the blue gem. The green gem was with Chonsin, and then Walhart took it, so we have to get it back from him. Plegia stole the black gem at some point, and Ferox has misplaced the red gem, quote unquote. While the shepherds head south to deal with Yenfei, Basilio and Flavia are keeping Walhart at bay up north. Just Walhart, against their entire army. Basilio sacrifices himself to keep Walhart occupied as long as possible. As Basilio is fake dying, he gives Flavia the red gem, and his dying wish is that she gets it back to the group. Before they head north, Lucina begs Basilio not to go, because in her timeline, this is where he dies. So our Basilio, with this knowledge, plays possum so Walhart will assume he's dead and move on. Thankfully, Lucina's warning allowed him to survive. With 3 gems in hand, all that's left is to get the green one from Walhart and figure out where the black one is. Time for another break, because at this point in the game, I had some children to raise. I went side questing, I recruited all of the child characters and did all of their boring maps, and I did a ton of level grinding for skills. I want to talk about builds, because I think a big part of the fun in Awakening is how you choose to build the second generation characters. In Awakening, each character can equip 5 skills that impact unit performance, which can range from like increasing a stat, increasing a unit's proficiency with certain weapons, buffing other units, so on and so forth. This gets somewhat more complicated due to gender locking of classes, so most mother characters are going to have different skill sets than father characters to pass down because of the few gender specific classes. Whatever the 5th skill is in a unit's kit is the one that will be passed down to their child, so skills that are normally not available to a certain gendered character can be passed down in this way. The main focus of skill inheritance discussion usually surrounds getting Gale Force on as many units as possible. Some might say Gale Force is a little overrated, and I kind of agree. It's only useful if your unit can actually get the kill, but if you're not using that unit as an attacker, you might not necessarily need it. It's only available through the Dark Flyer class, which is a promotion for the Pegasus Knight, and since that's locked to women, this section is going to be all about the moms. In my opinion, there isn't really a comparable busted skill that fathers can pass down, so I didn't really focus on them too much. There are 4 categories of children in regards to Gale Force. The girls who get it, the girls who don't, but actually can, we'll get to that, the boys who might, and the boys who will never. Please keep in mind also that I wasn't aiming for perfection, I wasn't trying to do max stats, so if you hear something and you're like, that's a stupid skill, I just want it to be known that that's not what I was trying to do. Starting off with the girls who get it, they can become Pegasus Knights on their own. Obviously Lucina, daughter of Crom and Maribel. I didn't actually do much work with Lucina. I did end up reclassing her into Dark Flyer for Gale Force, and I kept most of her Lord skills, including Aether. I then opted to go the magic route with her because she gets extra magic from her healer mother. In hindsight, I should have kept her in Sage for longer to get Tome Fair before reclassing into Dark Knight, which I mostly wanted because she could still use the falchion in that class. Cynthia, daughter of Sumia and Gaius, she got Gale Force from her mom and movement +1 from her dad. We'll be seeing move +1 a lot because the extra range is fun. I then promoted into Assassin for lethality, which gives her the chance to one-shot enemies, and is also a send-up to her Assassin father. Then I moved into Falcon Knight for Lance Fair for stronger attacks when she uses lances. I then settled into Dark Flyer for the final class, so she could also use tomes, and I thought it was just more exciting than Falcon Knight because that's where I ended with all my first-gen Pegasus Knights. Severa is the daughter of Cordelia and lon'qu. I decided that I wanted Inigo to be a hero, and I don't like Bow Knights really much, so instead I had Severa take after her father and intended for her to end in Swordmaster. She got Gale Force and Vantage from the parents. I don't know, my lon'qu wasn't doing too well, so I didn't spend a lot of time developing him. I then also reclassed her into Thief for movement +1, and then into Sorcerer for Vengeance, and then settled into Swordmaster for Astra and Swordfair. Astra is a skill that does 2.5 times the regular damage, but it has a very cool animation attached to it. Vengeance does extra damage proportional to how much HP you've lost, and Vantage always lets your unit attack first when your HP is low. So I think mentally I was trying to build a Swordmaster who, as a class, regularly never get hit because they have Great Avoid, but building her in such a way that if her HP ever dropped below half, she would just become an absolute unkillable monster. There's also another map later where all of your party members are enemy units, and it was very cool to see Severa in a red outfit instead of the generic blue. They didn't introduce all-inclusive custom color palettes for individual characters until Engage, so being stuck with hero blue whenever you switch out of your character's canon class is a little annoying. Maribel loses her pinks and Lissa loses her yellows, and it just makes everyone look so much more generic. For the boys who might, since only girls can ride Pegasi, these boys need to inherit Gale Force from their mothers. Owain is the son of Lissa and Donnell. I passed down Gale Force and Aptitude from Donnell. Owain ended up being an absolute monster like his father. I did end up going through the Sword Fighter route, keeping Vantage and Swordfair and Astra, and then I reclassed into Dreadfighter, a DLC class that I haven't really tried much before. Aggressor adds attack plus 10 when Owain initiates combat, so he's extremely strong as well when combined with the Swordfair boost. Unpopular opinion, I think Owain is kind of an annoying character, but I do want to highlight how he resolves Lissa's personal conflict. Emerin and Crom both have the mark of the Exalt on their bodies. Emerin has it on her forehead, Crom has it on his shoulder, but Lissa doesn't have the mark at all, and she's insecure about it because it makes her doubt the circumstances of her birth. But since Owain has the mark of the Exalt, it reassures her that her birth is legitimate. Inigo is the son of Vake and Olivia. He got Gale Force from his mom. Lord knows what he got from his dad. I had him reclass into Thief for movement +1, and then Myrmidon for Vantage. I don't know why I was really into Vantage this run. I think that was a symptom of laziness more than anything else. Swordmaster for Swordfair, and then Wrath from Berserker because I also wanted him to have Axefair for some reason. I think I wanted Axefair to replace Vantage, but I think I got bored of level grinding and just didn't go through with it. I wanted him to be a really heavy hitter with both swords and axes. Obviously, it didn't end up working out like that. And in hindsight, I think I should have just focused on axes to even out the weapon spread a little bit more. I also don't know why I didn't have Soul on him. Brady, the son of Crom and Maribel, brother to Lucina. Brady should normally be a magic unit, but I really wanted to use a War Monk this playthrough, which is an axe-wielding class that can heal other units. He has Rightful King from Crom, which means your skills proc more often. I also just found out that proc means program random occurrence, and I should have known that it wasn't just slang for thing happens. He has Gale Force, Luna, which does additional damage based on the enemy's defense stat, Heal Touch, which has heal +5, and then Aegis, which halves damage from tomes, dragonstones, and bows. The girls who could. So the tricky thing here is that Gaius and Donal both have boy-only classes that their daughters can't use because gender nonsense. These classes are converted into Pegasus Knight and the daughters so they can get Gale Force, but obviously you know that I didn't pursue any of these pairings, so this is just a fun fact and not pertinent to my builds. Na is the daughter of Rickon and Noe. Her build is kind of boring because I kept her just as a Manakete. I got Luna and Aegis from the Cavalier lines, kept Defender to make her a better pair-up supporter because it increases all of the stats of the unit that she's paired up with. Kiel is the daughter of Stall and Sully. She has Aegis and Luna from the Cavalier promoted lines, and then Pavis, I don't know how to pronounce this one. It's the equivalent skill to Aegis, but it's for sword, axes, and lance. It halves the damage. Sully and Stall is a bad pairing for class/skill pool. I think next time I would do Sully and Gaius so that Kiel can be in general but has access to move +1 and Gale Force. I think she would just be an absolute unit. I chose Great Knight for this run because it gives the pair-up partner extra move. I guess I didn't describe pair-up. Basically, this game has a function where imagine if chess pieces could occupy the same square on the chessboard and they become better friends that way. That's what pair-up is. Noir is the daughter of Tharia and Virion. She was really all over the place. I didn't know what I wanted to do with her, but I knew that I wanted to keep her in some sort of bow using class, so I used the Femme Dreadfighter equivalent for DLC classes, which is the Bride class. There are two genders, Dreadfighter and Bride. She has Vengeance from Sorcerer, Bowfair from Sniper, Pavice from General, and then I reclassed into Bride for Bond, which restores adjacent units HP, and Rally Heart, which increases stats for all nearby units. She definitely wasn't the strongest soldier in the army, but she offered interesting utility. I think the Bride class is kind of cool. Last category, the boys who don't. Their mothers don't get Gale Force. It's just not happening. Jerome is the son of Shersh and Gregor. I got Soul from Hero to recover HP from damage dealt, Wrath and Axefair from Berserker, and then Deliverer from Griffin Knight. The skill adds +2 movement when you're paired up with another unit, so it's +3 when he's paired up with Kiel, so his movement is increased to 11. Jerome is our Hercules. He can go the distance. Yarn is the son of Pan and Kellum. I did some thief stuff for move +1 and assassinate, Pavice for defense, and then I also gave him counter. Counter mirrors all damage dealt at one range. So I thought it would be very poetic to have a character whose race has been stamped out by humanity to make him untouchable, and all damage dealt to him is dealt back very evenly. Lastly, we have Laurent, son of Muriel and Libra. No cool build for him. I mostly just wanted to use him as a pair-up option to make Lucina's magic stat better. Now we'll touch a little bit more on the pairings for these second gen units. To explain a fun little tidbit about how supports work in this game, all of the Gen 1 characters have unique supports that are written for those specific characters. Then with the Gen 2 characters, each kid has a unique conversation with the parent character who doesn't change, and then they'll have a generic conversation with slight wording differences with their parent who can change. So like, for example, because Lucina will always be Crom's daughter, that conversation is unique, but with any of her 5 mothers, the conversation is always going to be about shopping for dresses. As I just mentioned, I paired Lucina with Laurent. Laurent is a very analytical character like his mom, but he has a bit more self-awareness that serves to humanize him a little bit more, and we know Lucina already. I actually really like them together. My headcanon is that Laurent would make a really good advisor, and I guess good king because they're married. I paired Inigo and Noir. Inigo is girl-obsessed, very virion-coded. Noir has been traumatized by her mother, who's been testing curses on her for her whole life. In their supports, Noir is basically stalking Inigo because he's been getting duped by women who steal from the camp. Brady is a punk who hates his noble upbringing. He's been trained in the violin and tea making and a lot of other high society activities, but he can't stand it. Cynthia wants to become a superhero, kind of like a glorified version of her mom, but she mentions that Sumia in the future becomes like a war criminal. Like, she's really crazy, I guess. With Kiel and Jerome, they're both kind of the strong, silent type, classic soldiers, if you will. Kiel is a little bit more heroic, whereas Jerome is a bit more resigned. Their supports are similar to Sully and Stalls, where they spar together. Kiel really wants to beat Jerome, and he doesn't understand why at first, and then at some point, Kiel says that she internally considers him a rival, and then he starts taking this little contest more seriously. Lastly, I paired Severa and Yarn. Severa's a brat, and Yarn's a coward, so it's a lot of like him running away from her and her yelling at him. I haven't talked about who Robin marries. I paired her with Owain, which was boring because their supports are bad. They have a son together named Morgan. Morgan is like Robin in that they can also get any class, but they'll always be the opposite binary gender from their parent. So obviously I chose girl Robin and I had boy Morgan, so I did pass down Gale Force. Then I got him Tome Fair from Sage, left him as a Grandmaster and called it a day. I paired Morgan and Na together. I think it's just poetic to have the 2 dragon babies from opposing sides be as close as possible. Na is a great character. She's like the total opposite of Noe. She's responsible. She cares a lot about reinvigorating the Manakete culture. Morgan is interesting because he may or may not come from a different timeline and is similar to his mom in that he lost all of his memories in the process of coming to the present day from the future. Anyways, returning to the plot, I now have a super army that can very easily steamroll Walhart and his cronies, so the endgame really easy. After 2 grand battles with the Conqueror, we get the green gem back and his colonization period is officially over. Entering the 3rd act, endgame, Grima. At this point, Valadar just offers to give us the black gem if we come and pay him a little visit. Like, Valadar is like, keep the boats, just come over. We can trust him. Even though the villain literally has the power to hijack Robin's brain and has the scary Robin twin, don't think about it, just head over there, get the gem. We get this incredible scene between Robin and Lucina, where Lucina reveals that her father's murderer in the future is none other than Robin, a real Judas moment. So she's going to kill her in this gorgeous, beautiful meadow at sunset. Crom interrupts this and says that Robin has to live, so Lucina drops the issue for now. Big surprise, betrayal in Plegia is imminent. Valadar doesn't give us the black gem. He actually steals the emblem by taking control of Robin's brain, and then he scurries off to the dragon table, which is a giant stone slab in Plegia where the remains of Grima lie. He's going to perform the rite of awakening to revive the fell dragon, and tons of Grim Leal are going on a pilgrimage to the table so that Grima can eat when he comes back to life. Yummy. We also learn that Valadar only gave us the boats and the money so that we would go kill Walhart, because Walhart's end goal was killing Valadar and stopping the revival of Grima. So we also get played. Is anybody shocked that this group of people got duped? The shepherds go to follow and get the emblem back. We have the big boss fight with Aversa, a character that I haven't really touched on yet. Her role is pretty similar to Tharia in the sense that she's like evil, violent, sexy girl. On her map, the only enemies besides her are a revival of the 12 Dead Lords, who are zombie warriors that originally appear in Genealogy of the Holy War. Intelligent Systems, give us the remake, please! Afterwards, we have the fight with Valadar that mirrors the very first map of the game, except it's a fully fleshed out battle, and not just Crom and Robin fighting one guy. All of the same stuff happens, except Robin is able to maintain some control and make the spell weaker so Crom doesn't actually get killed, and then we murder Valadar. Hierophant Robin enters the mix here and reveals that they are Robin from Lucina's future, where Grima is actually revived and he inhabits her body as a vessel. When Grima, Robin came back from the future, they tried to just possess Robin's body, and that's what caused the amnesia with Robin at the beginning. Robin Grima uses the life energy of all the Grimleal to revive the fell dragon, and we end up taking the emblem back to prepare for the last stand. The shepherds go to Mount Prism to perform the awakening because that's where Naga's remains are. They speak to Naga, she unlocks the falchion's full power, but then tells them that she tells them that it won't be enough to defeat Grima. Another Incredibles reference, the only thing powerful enough to defeat Grima is himself, aka Robin. The player is given the choice in the last chapter between allowing Crom to deliver the final blow, but Grima will just be temporarily sealed. He'll be revived eventually, or Robin can sacrifice herself and end Grima forever. We get to the final map, and I was just having fun beating up the reinforcements at this point. Like, the kids are so strong. I have Robin deliver the final blow, and she disappears for a while. All the cast mourn her one by one. Then, sometime later, Crom and Lissa wake her up in a field and say welcome back. This creates a really fabulous bookend, paralleling with the beginning of the game. Yay! That's the game. A lot of people give Awakening flack, but I think the story holds up pretty well. Like, genuinely. There are plot holes that I can understand not ignoring. Like, some of the sequences are stupid, but I think the story and the characters are so good. While the main story is over, we do have DLC to talk about. They added 6 free maps later that allow you to recruit mainly dead characters, so you can get Emerin, Yenfei, Gangrel, Walhart, Aversa, and then a new character named Priam. Emerin is revealed to have survived, but she has severe amnesia due to her fall. She seems to be really struggling. The recruitable Yenfei is from an alternate universe where his sister dies. Walhart has to fight Crom at least once, and then he'll join. Gangrel is harder to recruit because you have to talk to him with Crom 3 times before he'll join, without killing him because he's an enemy unit. Aversa and Priam both join at the end of their chapters, but their chapters are a little bit cooler than the others. Priam's is just kind of hard. He's built a big band of followers because he's allegedly a descendant of the Radiant hero Ike, and there are 50 enemies on his map. Aversa's chapter is so cool, and they also take the biggest swing with their character retcon. It takes place at the Wellspring of Truth, and if you look into its waters, you'll learn the truth itself, but you have to fight a copy of yourself to earn the reward. This map is really easy if you bring like 1 or 2 really strong units and then only bring characters that you've benched all game, because if everyone is strong, then your enemies all hit really hard. Aversa is here because she wants to learn the truth of her past, because apparently she was enslaved by Valadar and he had total control over her. She has a very Yennefer of Vengerberg origin story because she was just a normie girl from a normie village with innate magical power, and then the Grimleal took her away and brainwashed her. It's cool that we can recruit all of these characters, but I do think that they're poorly integrated. Like, it's such a shallow attempt at reintroducing them because they come right before the last chapter. They can't influence the narrative at all, and they have no supports with anyone, so they can't even really build a relationship with other characters, even ones that would make sense. Like, there's a really difficult story here about Lissa and Crom and Emerin, and what it looks like to try and support a family member who doesn't remember you and is not really able to take care of themselves on their own. I also really don't like that they reintroduce Emerin in a fighting capacity. Like, I don't want to use her. I feel like she shouldn't be fighting. Literally, she's been through enough. The game kind of addresses this issue. There are 3 paid DLC maps: Harvest Scramble, Summer Scramble, and Hot Spring Scramble. The point of these maps is to get additional dialogue between characters, especially with characters who don't already have supports together. For example, Emerin and Gangrel can talk, but they can only do it at the hot springs. I don't know. I wish they would have taken the time to just make them full characters. The last thing I want to talk about is the Future's Past DLC, which is an alternate retelling of the future where Grima is revived. All of the parent characters are dead, and the children are fighting their hardest to perform the rite of awakening. Naga warps us to the future to aid them in the fight against Grima. There's so much AU content in this game. The kids have split into 3 groups of 4. The first chapter follows Cynthia, Noir, Kiel, and Na getting 2 of the gems, and then the second chapter follows Brady, Yarn, Owain, and Inigo getting another 2 of the gems. Morgan is the boss for both of these chapters as well, but different genders. So I don't know if future Grima Robin has twins. Like, maybe our Robin also has a daughter that's just floating in space-time that we never knew to even look for, because the game only tells us to find our son. The last chapter shows Lucina, Laurent, Jerome, and Severa at the castle with the emblem and the last gem. They're on the castle roof, and Lucina reveals that Tiki sacrificed herself to protect Lucina. And for me, there's also a new implication with these characters. Laurent, Jerome, and Severa should bear a little bit more plot importance because they were tasked to protect the princess against the fell dragon. Thanks to our party's meddling, the three groups are able to convene at the castle. At this point, I was ready to be done with the game, so I skipped the whole map and just used Brady and Cynthia's combined Gale Force so they could move 3 times in a row and just kill Grima turn 1. Because Tiki died and she was the voice of Naga, she now has become a divine dragon, meaning the awakening can be performed at the castle because her remains are here, and Lucina is able to defeat Grima and save her future. 1 year later, the group meets again and it's a very happily ever after. Noir is making good luck charms, Kiel and Owain are training new recruits and evaluating the army. Yarn is being overprotected by conservationists because he's the last Togwell. People believe that Na is the new voice of Naga. Jerome shows up without his mask and no one knows who he is, and he's working to protect the wyverns. He also says that it's nice that no one recognizes him in public without his mask. Makes it a little bit easier because he doesn't get recognized as a hero. Inigo is a dancer now, and Brady is accompanying him on the violin, but he wants to be a barista someday and make tea. Owain also wants to travel with them as a singer. Cynthia is leading the new Pegasus Knights, and Severa has also enlisted. They're actually the ones who escorted Lucina to the meeting. Now the 12 heroes have reunited, and they're all happy, but it's tough knowing that another version of their parents are alive in another world. There's a second end screen, and now the game is over. At least narratively. You can play Awakening forever and ever, and there's technically still so much more to do. I didn't even touch Apotheosis because those maps are extremely hard. Outside of the plot, I do think there are some unexplored avenues, some untapped potential. If they did more story-based DLC, they could have played with these ideas, or just side chapters that focus on specific characters in general. Could be a manga. I want Sumia's origin story. They could flesh out her character so much more because she literally becomes a Pegasus Knight during the course of the story. I'm interested in her having a kind of zero to hero arc. Lucina is literally living the plot of 12th Night, but all of that happens off screen. Like, I'm curious what her downtime looks like. Basilio and friends. Basilio has a rich inner life that isn't really touched. Like, what's his relationship to lon'qu? What's his relationship to Olivia? Show me him ruling as the Western Khan of Regna Ferox for the many years that he was the ruler. Virion has a whole life with Shersh that we don't really see. Like I said, Seri gets shafted. She should become the queen. Or maybe we see some of her life with Yanfei before the conquest. Pan is really cool, but I also think she's very poorly established. You kind of have to do a lot of digging to understand what happened to the Togwell, but I want to know, and I want to meet more of them. Who is Morgan? They have no memories. They have no recollection of their parent who isn't Robin. Also, Aversa's whole life. Like, give me the AU where she is just living the plot of The Witcher. That is everything I had for today. I think I've talked too much. I feel like this footage is going to be 3 hours and hopefully my phone didn't freaking die. What do you think? Do you like Awakening? Do you love Awakening as much as I do? If you're a Fire Emblem person, where did you start the franchise from? Like I said, Awakening was my first game. Do you agree? Do you disagree with my takes? Yeah, that's all for today. Please feel free to like and subscribe. I make all of this content just for fun, so it'd be really nice if you could support the channel.